Alright, so I've always been fascinated with lasers against the bots in Helldivers 2. I've always wanted to create a pure laser build, and I've never been able to quite figure out one that has worked really well. I've had many attempts and tried different things, but they've always fell short in some sort of way. But between some new things that we've gotten in and some oldies that have become really good, I feel like I've been able to not only create a laser build that is really good, but it's also extremely viable, meaning that it's going to actually be able to easily clear the bots in a lot of ways, whether you're doing it with a team or solo. And it's actually really surprising how effective this build is. So anyways, I want to go over this build that I've come up with that's centered around using a lot of the laser things in Helldivers 2, and I have dubbed this build Laser Armageddon. Anyways, let's talk about it. All right, so jumping into it, we are not running any crowd control items, so we're going to jump right into the damage section, and one of our main damage dealers is going to be the double-edged sickle. This is a very unique weapon that allows us to dish out a ton of laser barrage goodness. This is definitely a high-risk, high-reward weapon that is very good against the bots, and it's actually become one of the top favorite items to use against the bots, but it does have some caveats that we'll get into in just a moment. This weapon does increase in damage and penetration as it heats up. And the basic breakdown of it is at 25% heat, this thing will get medium pen and 55 damage. At 50% to 90% heat, it will have medium penetration at 70 damage. And lastly, after 90% heat, it will have heavy penetration at 70 damage. And after it overheats, you will catch fire and you will slowly take more damage. So jumping into the strengths of this weapon and what makes it so good is that it's an incredible horde clearing tool. It's going to absolutely eviscerate the Devastators. It's going to run through the Shredder enemies. It's going to run through all the various cannon fodder. This thing is extremely good at clearing the hordes of enemies on the bot side. Another thing is that the damage increases as it heats up, as well as the penetration, which is absolutely incredible. And speaking of the penetration, this thing gets heavy armor penetration at 90% heat, which is ludicrous. So you're going to be able to penetrate through Hulk's faces and kill them very quick, in seconds even, and it's absolutely ridiculous. And on top of that, the best part of this weapon is that it has unlimited ammo 100%, meaning that even when this thing heats up, unlike other laser weapons, it will cool back down, so that way you don't have to swap out the thermal clips unless you absolutely want to cool it down a little bit faster. So for the main weaknesses of this weapon, it does kill you over time, meaning that if you're not running things to offset this damage, you will die eventually just from shooting this thing unless you use stims to offset it as well. So with that being said, you basically are pigeonholed into running two vital things to make this thing operate at its maximum potential, which are inflammable and the vitality booster, because both of these things combined make you take significantly less damage once you hit those upper echelons of heat, but you will be basically taking 0 damage at various times getting up to that upper echelon of heat, and then when you catch fire, you will not be dying as fast. But these two items are very critical to make this weapon perform at its maximum potential, like I mentioned. And then lastly, one of the things that I hope they adjust in the future is that this weapon has to heat up to 25% heat before you get medium armor penetration, meaning that you're going to be using light pen when you're actually shooting those first few shots, which is kind of annoying when you're trying to start engaging encounters. So some key points of note for this weapon are: save yourself the headache, honestly, and just run inflammable. I would particularly run the heavy inflammable armor passive if you have that one, but if you have the medium, that's just fine. And definitely run the vitality booster. This is more important than running something like Hellpod optimization if you're running solo, so make sure you're running that vitality booster. The reason why I suggest the heavy version over the medium and the light version is because you do take less damage overall when you're running the heavy version and vitality booster, but again, if you don't have it, the medium armor is going to be just fine. Don't be scared to just lay down a crap ton of bullets. That's the best thing about this weapon, is you can just keep shooting. It's going to get stronger as it shoots. It has unlimited ammo, and yes, it does hurt you, but it can cool down. So just don't be scared to shoot this thing as much as humanly possible at whatever target you're shooting at. I would say that if you have a situation where you have a Hulk nearby and you've been shooting it for a while and you're getting close to that upper 90% threshold, start shooting the Hulk with it. It's going to do a crap ton of damage because that heavy pin will cut through its faceplate very easily, and you will kill them within seconds. Seriously, this thing is very effective when you get up to that 90% threshold against hulks. One key point with this weapon is if you go prone when you're shooting this weapon, as you're catching fire, you will take significantly less damage, which is a really good strategy. If you dive backwards and you're still shooting an enemy, you'll actually be taking less fire damage, which is good, and you'll be able to kill that target very easily. All right, so jumping into our secondary source of damage, which is going to be the laser cannon. Now, in my opinion, this thing is extremely underrated, but I do understand why people may not use this as a primary source of damage, just because it's not very good as a primary source of damage, but in this build as a secondary source of damage, it is absolutely perfect because it does 350 damage per second with heavy penetration, meaning that it's going to be able to penetrate right through those Hulk faceplates if you really want it to. In general, it is just really good to hot swap when your double-edged sickle is overheated. You can hop swap to the laser cannon, and it will absolutely clean up and do some good work against the various units on the bot side. So jumping into the strengths of this weapon, it does have unlimited ammo, very similar to the double-edged sickle, but the difference is that once this thing heats up, you do need to exchange the clip. So there is that. You need to make sure not to overheat this thing too often. This thing can shoot for up to 12.5 seconds before it hits that overheat, which is really good because it's going to last a long time and give you some good prolonged fire on your enemies. One other benefit of this thing is that the longer you shoot enemies, they will actually catch on fire and take some bonus damage, which is very good as well. This is just a little bonus thing I like about this thing, but I really do like the first person scope. I like how it zooms in a little bit and gives you a clear sight line for what you're hitting. It's just very good. And then again, this thing does have heavy pen all the time. It doesn't require any heat up mechanic, which is great. And then one of the biggest things I like about this thing that's sneaky underrated is that it's very good at taking out the gunchips very quickly, which is great. So jumping into the weaknesses for this weapon, it's not massively strong overall, so it's not great for horde clearing, meaning that's why it's our secondary source of damage in this build and going to be our swap thing when the DES overheats. And the fire type is very isolated, meaning that you're going to be having to use a lot of precision when shooting this thing, so it is a little bit of a higher skilled weapon to use, especially when you're shooting at things like hulks or even the gunchips when they're flying around. So it's just something to keep in mind. So some key points for this weapon are, again, you're going to be hot swapping between the double-edged sickle and this, so make sure you're using this sparingly. You don't have to use this as your primary source of damage, but again, it can do some really good damage against the hulks more specifically. And then again, it can clear hordes in a pinch. It's pretty decent at that, but overall, this weapon is just good at what it is, as basically a secondary weapon in this build. All right, so jumping into one of our main sources of anti-tank, which is the rocket sentry. So this thing is literally a rocket sentry that shoots rockets. It's pretty self-explanatory, but essentially this thing does 525 direct impact damage. This thing is really strong at being able to take on some of the elite units because it has anti-tank properties and going to be able to really do a lot of damage to hulks, factory striders, and all those things. So the main strengths of the sentry is that it has a really good cooldown, meaning that you're going to be able to call down a lot of these during your bot encounters, and it's just very quick to come back. Not only is this thing great against the elite units, but it is really good at horde clearing, which is one of the main reasons why I love bringing this so much against the bots. It also has a great targeting range, meaning that you can throw this pretty far away and it's actually going to target enemies at great distances, which is great. Sentries are kind of hard for the bots to shoot, so depending on where you place it, it's actually going to have some good survivability overall. The ammo economy is also very good for this thing, meaning that it's not going to just waste all of its ammo on various cannon fodder. And then lastly, overall, it's pretty solid at target acquisition, usually prioritizing the bigger units over the smaller ones. The main weaknesses of the rocket sentry is that if an enemy does get pretty close to it, it will stop shooting to protect itself because of the splash damage. It doesn't want to kill itself, so it can be kind of useless as you're being pushed by enemies. This thing can knock you over when it shoots from the little air that comes out from the back of it if it does spin around on accident and you're doing something, so be mindful of that. And this thing will occasionally team kill if people aren't paying attention or if they're right next to some enemies, but I don't really think this team kills as much as other sentries overall. So some key points with the rocket sentry to keep in mind are that you need to make sure you put it up on elevated advantages and in open areas where possible, because this thing is going to absolutely destroy if you place it well, because if you put it on an elevated advantage, it will not get disrupted by enemies coming closer. And then if you go into wide open areas, the bots will have a little bit of a harder time hitting it, in my opinion. And just in general, it has plenty of 360 range to be able to hit whatever targets are in the vicinity. Use this thing often, especially when you're holding your ground on objective areas, or if you're being pushed by enemies. You can throw this over the enemies or to the right or to the left, and it will be able to do a good flank damage to the enemies to be able to help you clean them up. in general, this thing is just really good, and you don't be scared to just throw this in when you need to, even if it's not for an anti-tank situation. So our next anti-tank option is going to be the thermite grenade. So the thermite grenades are the only anti-tank grenade in the game, and many people love running these for a wide variety of reasons, but the primary reason is because this thing does a whopping 2,000 damage when it explodes on an enemy, and an additional 150 damage per second when it's burning enemies. It's just really good and going to be able to destroy a lot of the elite units on the battlefield. So the main strengths of this grenade are that it does a massive amount of damage to elites on the bot side, meaning it's going to one-shot tanks, hulks, towers, fabricators, whatever is in the way on the bot side is going to be able to kill them very quickly. Against the factory striders, it does take multiple grenades, sometimes 2+ in a lot of situations, but it is really effective against them paired with other things. The main weakness of this grenade is that it takes 6.5 seconds for it to explode and actually kill your target, so it's going to be one of those things where you need to throw and kind of run away if you have a Hulk chasing you or something. It does have the occasion to bounce off targets, which is kind of annoying, and then you are only limited to 3 of these at any given time unless you get a resupply or something, so you need to be mindful of that as well. So some key points for how this grenade is going to benefit our build is that we're going to be primarily using this for the factory striders and the Hulks, because the main thing that I want to make sure is that we're not wasting these, because it's good against the Hulks and we'll kill them in one shot, which is great. So in a pinch, if you need to do a drive-by, that's really good. But against the factory striders, this is going to be great for helping us kill them quickly. Paired with something like the rocket sentry or whatever, you're going to be able to kill factory striders very quickly with this grenade paired with something else. And also in a pinch, if you do want to destroy something like a fabricator, you can just throw this and it will stick to it and then destroy it very quickly, which is good as well. And then one little key tip for this thing is if you aim more to the right side of enemies, if you're left adjacent, you will stick them more often and it will have a little bit more consistency and won't bounce off of them. So our next form of anti-tank is going to be the Automaton. So this thing is just a really powerful secondary weapon in the game. This actually has the same exact properties of the precision strike, which is absolutely ludicrous for that being a secondary item, meaning that it's going to be dealing 3,500 projectile damage and 1,000 explosive damage, meaning if you hit something like a Hulk, it will one-shot it very easily, which is absolutely stupid. So jumping into the strengths of this weapon, again, it has the same exact properties of the precision strike, meaning that it's going to be able to destroy a lot of objectives on the map that do not require a hell bomb. So something like the detector towers, any of the mortar encampments, the fabricators, or whatever you wish. It's going to be able to destroy a lot of the objectives on the map, which is very good against the bots. And then it's going to be able to kill the elites very effectively if you direct impact them, meaning if you direct impact a Hulk, a tank, or whatever, it's going to be able to kill them in one shot, which is great. And then paired with our other anti-tank tools, is going to be able to take out factory striders very quickly. So it's just a very good versatile option for us against any of the enemies or the objectives on the map. The main weaknesses of this weapon are that it has very limited ammo, and ever since they did the changes where siege ready and help out optimization do not affect this thing, it means that we're going to be more limited on ammo, but you can hold up to 2 of these at one time, meaning you have 1 in the tube and then 1 in reserve. This is a very heavy projectile, so you need to be careful with how you're actually shooting this thing because the range is very limited. And then there's an occasional ghost round issue that is more of a glitch. I think they're going to fix this over time. I think it has something to do with the reload, but essentially there is the occasional ghost round, which is kind of annoying. So some key points of the Ultimatum is that you're going to be using this pretty sparingly. I would primarily prioritize this for objectives, factory striders, and the occasional Hulk or tank in a certain situation. But even though you're going to be running something like the supply pack, which we're going to talk about in just a moment, you're not wanting to spam this a lot because there's really no need. You have plenty of other things to deal with these anti-tank situations. So that's why I like to use this for things like detector towers or something that's in the way, and I never want to be limited on how many of these I have at any given time. So in general, you're going to be using this sparingly, but you can use this very effectively against factory striders and objectives. It is super good at that. All right, so jumping into our support option for this build, I mentioned it a second ago, but we're going to be running the supply pack. So the reason why we're bringing the supply pack is because it's going to be able to bring this whole build together, and it is one of the best things you can bring in against the bots overall, because we are using more resources in my opinion. So the main thing I like about this is because we're not going to be using it to refund our double-edged sickle or our laser cannon. We're going to mainly be using this for stims, equipment, and to refund our ultimatum shots, meaning that we're going to be able to use these way more frequently, especially the thermite grenades and the ultimatum shots, which is very nice. So the main strengths of the supply pack are that it keeps you resupplied. It's pretty self-explanatory, meaning that you have 4 bricks of resupply on you at any time to be able to resupply yourself and also resupply your teammates if you would like. When you do drop a regular resupply pod, you actually do get an ammo break back on your back, which is very good. So if you want to be stingy, if you're on a team and take all 4, you'll get 4 of your resupply breaks back, but it's really good if you go solo as well. The main weaknesses of the supply pack are it does not give you a full resupply, meaning you're only getting 50%. Now, in cases like the ultimatum, you are getting 1 shot back, which is huge, but in cases like stims, you're only getting 2 back if you have only 4 at your maximum, or vice versa with the grenades. So it is limited with that. So some key points with the supply pack are you are going to be using this quite a lot because it's going to be able to keep your weapons going, meaning that you're going to be able to keep refunding your ultimatum shots, meaning you're going to be able to keep refunding your thermites and your stims, which is why I don't want you to use the ultimatum so much, because your tendency is you shoot the ultimatum, you grab a resupply brick, and that's a waste because you're going to be using so many stims, you're going to be using so many thermite grenades that you want to have more of these available for those situations more than ultimatum shots. So you're going to be wanting to shoot your ultimatum in situations where you might need something else, and then that's kind of how you want to play the game with that. But yeah, it's very easy if you're not careful to waste supply bricks, but again, you can call this back multiple times in a dive because you're going to get multiple of these if you call it down early, which is great. And then also you can resupply it from resupply, so that's something to keep in mind as well. So our main source of base clearing is going to be the orbital laser. Now this is a really powerful laser dealing 600 damage per second, and it lasts 25 seconds total. It's ridiculously strong and very, very good at clearing out bases. Now again, I mentioned it, this thing is strictly for base clearing. This is not for clearing up enemies, but you can, in a pinch, use this to clear up large drops, anything like that. If your team is just overwhelmed, this thing will clean up a lot of enemies very quickly, which is great as well. Now the strength of the orbital laser is, again, it lasts 25 seconds, so it's good enough to kill the majority of bases and wipe out everything in there, meaning destroy all the fabricators, destroy whatever other objectives are in there, kill any units. It is just very strong and going to last a long time depending on how you place it. This is also very good at killing elites, meaning it's going to be able to kill the factory striders and the hulks as well, which is very good. And then again, it can destroy the majority of objectives on the bot side as well. So jumping into the weaknesses for this thing, basically it gets stuck on heavy elites like factory striders for way too long at times, which is very frustrating and can hold it up, wasting like 10 seconds of this thing, which is very annoying. And the biggest thing about this thing that a lot of people hate, including myself, is that it only has 3 uses, which is very annoying because once you use all 3 of those uses, it's done for the rest of the dive, which is extremely limited in my opinion. On top of that, it has a criminally long cooldown for how few uses you have. It should have a much lower cooldown, but that's one thing you need to be mindful of, is if you use this thing, it's going to be on cooldown for a long time until your next laser. So some key points for this thing is that, again, I don't love the orbital laser as a general concept because I feel like the limited uses is very annoying. So that's why I strictly use this for base clearing, because it is the best base clearing tool against the bots, period. Meaning that if you use this strictly for bases, it's going to do an amazing job, which is why I suggest that you save one of these for the fortresses. There's always going to be at least one fortress on the map, especially if you're playing on level 10. So you're going to want to throw this in, and it's going to be able to destroy the majority of that fortress, if not fully kill it outright, which is absolutely good. So let's just say you use this on the fortress and you still have 2 uses left. Now, I strongly suggest that you use this to clear up the rest of the bases on the map, but if you, for whatever reason, don't want to do that and you want to save one for the random enemies, it's very good at clearing out a lot of enemies, which is good. But again, try not to drop this when the factory strider is in, but if you do, make sure you assist the laser with killing the factory strider so it doesn't get stuck on it for so long, so that way it can actually do more damage against the other enemies on the map. All right, so jumping into our armor passive, I mentioned it a couple times earlier, is that we're going to be using the inflammable armor passive, and I particularly want you to use the heavy one if you have it, but medium is fine. So it does give you a flat 75% resistance against all fire-based damage, meaning that you will take significantly less damage from your double-edged sickle heating up, which is very good and the main reason why we're bringing this in. So I strongly, again, suggest if you have the heavy armor version from the Superstore, bring it, but if you don't, bring the medium one from the warbond. So the strength of this is, as I mentioned before, it's going to be able to give us that maximum protection paired with vitality for the double-edged sickle, which is great. On top of that, it will protect us from the flamethrower against the hulks, which is also great. So it's going to be able to give us that maximum protection against those 2 options, which is great. The main weaknesses of bringing this passive is that's only giving us the protection against fire, and it's for the double-edged sickle. It doesn't give us any other utility that we would normally get from other armor passes, which is kind of annoying and pretty limited, but it's necessary for this build. All right, so jumping into my final thoughts of the build and kind of how it played when I was actually using it overall. In general, it was really fun just being super subjective with it, and it provides a good high risk, high reward play style that makes you really think, and I do enjoy that when I'm playing this game. I really did enjoy swapping between the double-edged sickle and the laser cannon. It was really satisfying being able to juggle between two infinite ammo options. It was just a lot of fun. And then again, I really loved using the laser cannon against the gunships. It was just super cinematic to be able to shoot them out of the sky, which was really cool. And then it was also very good against the Hulks, which was great. And then in my opinion, there's nothing more satisfying than shooting the double-edged sickle basically forever when you pair it with inflammable armor passive and vitality. It is just so good and so powerful for horde clearing on the bot side. The rocket sentry was a great addition to this build because it gave us that necessary anti-tank that we needed, and on top of that, it was just really good at helping us hold down objective areas, meaning it was great for clearing up bot drops if there was a big horde of enemies coming in. So it was great at doing that. So in general, the rocket sentry was just absolutely fantastic. So the thermite and the ultimatum were both great paired together with this build with all of our other anti-tank options, because it gave us plenty of anti-tank things to be able to clear out whatever was in front of us. I loved using these things against the factory striders, against the Hulks. They were both very good in tandem. And then because we were running the supply pack, we were able to keep all of this going, which was very, very good. So that way we could just have plenty of resources at our disposal. Alrighty, so that's my laser Armageddon build for the bots. Let me know what you guys think about this build down in the comments below, and give me your suggestions for how you would tweak this and what you would actually bring in place of things. Or if you don't, just let me know if you're going to be running this build in your next dives. Anyways, guys, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.